use our privilege to defend our immigrant students and their families. As a former undocumented student and newcomer myself, this is very personal. And I know that having a caring teacher and being in a safe school environment gave me the opportunity to learn and thrive. My name is Montserrat Garibay, and I am the Eastern Region Representative and the Advocacy Chair of the National Association for Bilingual Education. We are delighted to have an outstanding list of panelists from AFT, IDRA, Schools, Reimagine Immigration, the Wisconsin Association for Bilingual Education, the Mount Vernon School District from Washington. I will be your moderator today, and we are grateful again that you're here today. Please use the chat to tell us where you're joining us from and what role do you play in supporting our immigrant families. Let's give a few minutes as you start. While we wait, we're also adding a very powerful story from Edwick that was published on October 31st. And, at the end of the story, an educator shared the following. Find the courage to be able to be there for yourself and for the families that you're representing. Because the only way that anybody is going to be safe is if we stick together and we keep each other safe. We'll put the story on the chat. And while you're joining us, thank you so much. This webinar is scheduled to run for 60 minutes, including Q&A at the end of the session. Please submit any of the questions that you have in the Q&A feature located at the bottom of your screen. You can also use the chat box to share your thoughts. But please note that the Q&A feature is the best way for submitting any questions to the speakers. Also, please note that this session is being recorded and that it's being transmitted in YouTube. We will also have a survey at the end of the presentation. And before we begin, again, thank you so much for participating today. Let me turn it to our president of NAVE, Margarita Machado.
Buenas tardes, muchas gracias, Montserrat. Buenas tardes, and welcome everyone. It is really an honor to be here with you all, educators, advocates, families, and leaders who every single day stand up for our multilingual and immigrant students. On behalf of the National Association for Bilingual Education, I want to thank you for joining this critical conversation. Like Montserrat mentioned, for me, this is also very personal because I spent 17 years as an undocumented immigrant in the United States, and my teachers were the ones that held me together, provided that safe space. So I'm really excited to be here with you today. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge yesterday's elections across the country. We witnessed communities showing up, voting with hope, courage, and a clear message that change is both needed and possible. These results remind us that people believe in a better future. And yet, as we celebrate this moment, we will also stay prepared for all that lies ahead. Political winds keep shifting, and our students and our familias will continue to feel those impacts first. So this is our work, our advocacy, our unity, and our preparation, and that's what matters the most, and that's why I'm so excited to be here. At NAVE, we know that language is power, it is identity, it is community, it is hope, and in moments of uncertainty like the ones that we're living right now, when policies shift and when fears grows and when our families face the unthinkable, as we're facing right now, our schools must remain those places that are safe, of strength, of love, and the teachers are at the core of that. You as teacher and community members at the core of that. Today's webinar is not just about responding to the crisis, it's about preparing with purpose. It's about building systems that protect our students, the rights to learn without fear, and ensuring that every single educator has the tools, the courage, and the community to respond with compassion and clarity. We come together today because we protect our immigrant students, every single student in the classroom. We protect the very soul of public education, inclusion, equity, and justice for all. Thank you so much for being part of this movimiento, of this movement, for choosing action over silence and continuing to lead with corazón, with courage, and with conviction. So it is my honor to pass it on again to our amazing colega, Montserrat Garibay. Gracias. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here today, and to all our speakers.
Thank you, Margarita. Well, let's begin. We have a lot to cover today, and please help me welcome Morgan Craven from the Intercultural Development Research Association, better known as IDRA. Morgan is the National Director of Policy, Advocacy, and Community Engagement. She will be setting the context of what we're going to talk today. Adelante, Morgan.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me. I'm gonna share my screen. Can you all see that? Okay, perfect. So as Montserrat just shared, I'm gonna set a little bit of context and talk about the landscape of immigration and education policy right now. This is the most depressing part of the hour, probably, but I think it's nice to do it so that we all have a shared understanding and then get on to the business of what are all of us doing. What does the action, what does the advocacy look like in our communities, states, and the federal level to really address these challenges that we see that are creating barriers for immigrant students and their families. So I'm just going to take a few minutes to name some of the very large policy practice rhetoric shifts that are happening, particularly at the federal level, that are certainly impacting communities and states and students and their families. The first that I would highlight is that there are certainly threats, and not just threats, but cuts to federal funding that are really impacting public schools and immigrant students and their families. Earlier this year, there was an unsuccessful effort to withhold billions of dollars in funds, including Title III funds, which are meant to support schools as they serve multilingual learners and immigrant students. And thanks to the advocacy of many of you on this call, that effort to withhold those funds was defeated. There are ongoing efforts, though, to really restrict funds that are really critical for serving and supporting students and families. We are now paused in budget discussions because of the federal shutdown, but we have 3 proposed budgets from the White House, from the House, and from the Senate, 2 of which propose to completely eliminate Title III funds, which again are designed to really support states and schools to serve multilingual learners and immigrant students. There have been cuts to discretionary funding, and there's an effort to really shift the funding from being distributed by the federal government, which has an explicit focus on civil rights and targeted student funding, and instead sending that funding to states to distribute through block grants. The danger, of course, there is that those states will not target the funding at the students that need it most, and will not focus the funding on programs that serve immigrant students and families. Sort of the second bucket of challenges in terms of the policy landscape right now, I think are reductions in staffing at the federal level. And those are both really intentional, straightforward reductions in staffing, people literally getting fired since the start of the administration, and also an attempt to do massive reductions in staffing through the government shutdown that we're currently experiencing. So we know that nearly all the staff at the Office of English Language Acquisition was let go close to the beginning of the start of the administration. Attorneys from the Office for Civil Rights, which enforce civil rights protections and investigate violations of student civil rights, including the civil rights of multilingual learners and immigrant students, have been fired, and field offices have been closed. Staff that monitor how these funds are spent and whether states and districts are complying with the requirements for how they're spent have been fired. And again, we know the shutdown has really exacerbated those issues by forcing furloughs and essentially forcing a lot of our critical federal experts and attorneys out that are really were really focused on making sure that schools were equipped and were indeed honoring the requirements to serve immigrant students and multilingual learners. Related to that, a huge problem is the diminished civil rights enforcement that is happening at the federal level right now. That is certainly in line with what a lot of states were already doing, which was not being focused on on following the laws and protecting student civil rights. And that obviously impacts a lot of different students, but that means that the folks who were investigating complaints, who were making sure that schools were meeting their requirements to serve all students, including multilingual learners and immigrant students, who were putting out guidance, a lot of that infrastructure is diminished and essentially is not functioning at this point. We know, as a very concrete example, that the U.S. Department of Education recently rescinded guidance that was in place to help states and schools understand how to support multilingual learners and immigrant students and their families, and advise states and school districts on how to protect those students from discrimination. Obviously, the sort of second to last bucket I'll name of real threats to immigrant students and families are threats to Plyler v. Doe, which is, of course, the Supreme Court case that guarantees access to K-12 public schools in this country to all students, including undocumented students and students whose families may be undocumented. And so there is a strategy in place. We know what the strategy is, to essentially challenge Plyler through state laws and resulting litigation and take the case back to the Supreme Court to try to have the Plyler ruling overturned. And so this is absolutely something that I know a lot of folks are, there are efforts in states to do this, certainly during the latest legislative sessions. It's something that a lot of us are preparing for in upcoming state legislative sessions. And just how do we make sure that schools are complying with federal law to really ensure access, not just direct access to education, but also make sure there are no chilling effects that impact students and families' ability to go to school and fully engage in school. And then I'll just finally name that there are other issues, other policy issues that are really presenting barriers to equal access to education for immigrant students and their families. One is definitely the shutdown that we are currently in. As I mentioned, civil rights investigations were already diminished under the current administration. And certainly during the shutdown, one of the things that the Department of Education explicitly said it would stop doing is any sort of civil rights investigations and enforcement. So that has been paused during the shutdown. I know all of you are familiar also with the impacts to benefits and programs for children and families that certainly impact immigrant students and families, including closing down Head Start sites, reducing SNAP benefits, threatening SNAP benefits altogether, the same for WIC. And so a lot of the programs and supports that were in place for students and families are being threatened right now because of what's going on with the shutdown. We have, for a long time, experienced a very real threat to immigrant students and families because of the rhetoric that, has just become commonplace, certainly under this administration, the positions that they have taken, the executive orders that they have issued, many of which fortunately have been challenged in court, but still create that fear and those chilling effects when it comes to immigrant students and their families being able to confidently access education. Obviously, ICE raids and enforcement and deportation are a huge issue that a lot of students and families are facing. And then finally, I'll name just sort of the broad anti-DEI, which is at its core an anti-civil rights approach that this administration is taking, and the resulting policies that really make it hard for students to confidently and their families to confidently attend school. And once they are there, to see themselves in the curriculum, to have the supports that they need, whether it's K-12 or higher ed. And so a lot of those policies, in addition to direct impacts on students and families, are also affecting all of us and our ability to operate and serve and support these students and families. So as I said, a very sort of sobering analysis of what is happening, but that is the reality that we're facing. And I'm excited that we're all here to talk about what we're doing to really push back against it.
Thank you, Morgan. I appreciate your in-depth knowledge. And you're setting up the foundation of why we're doing this, right? There's certainly uncertainty, but we're all about organizing and trying to figure out how do we best protect our students and how we empower our educators, administrators to really roll up their sleeves and defend our communities. So next we have Esmeralda Alday from IM Schools. She is the Senior Director for Programs and Impact at the IM School. She's a wonderful resource and has a lot of wonderful information for us to share. Adelante.
Muchas gracias, Montserrat, and welcome everybody. We can go ahead and start at slide 4. So what's at stake for our families here and our schools, right? IM Schools does the bulk of our work in schools and with community-based organizations to ensure that our students and our families feel safe regardless of their legal status. If we go to slide 5, we'll see what we are hearing from the field, directly from the field. IM School serves across the country with offices in San Antonio, Texas, in Dallas, in Philadelphia, in Camden, New Jersey, in Colorado, and in California. What are we hearing, and as well as in New York? What are we hearing from our schools? What are our families waking up to every day? When our students and our families are getting ready for school in the morning, they're bombarded with messages like this. The educators that serve them are bombarded with messages like this. And in a school district where I recently served for many years, we lost 1,000 students in one summer, 1,000 emergent bilinguals over the course of 1 year. And that's in a system where we kept very careful track of our students based on their emergent bilingual or multilingual coding and their immigrant coding. So not to give you any more depressing stories, but just so that, just like we shared earlier, it's important that we are grounded in the reality because our families face this every day. Next slide, please. So we're seeing the impact of these actions in 3 areas. Attendance, right? Not only are we losing out on thousands of our students that are often unenrolling from 1 hour to the next, right? But in states like California and Texas, where school funding is based on ADA or average daily attendance, where is the funding for bilingual teachers coming from? For our preschool teachers, even to turn on the lights, right? All of this comes from average daily attendance and from students like our multilingual learners who often bring weighted funding to school districts, right? Because our students receive more services, districts receive more funding for them. If we're not fighting to keep our students regardless of ideology, then this is hitting our bottom line in ways that we cannot even begin to imagine. Beyond that, most importantly, the mental health climate for our students and our families and the teachers that are doing their very best to serve them and be there for them while not knowing how to navigate the legal parameters of what they can and cannot say or how they can and cannot show up for our families. Next slide, please. So how are we responding at IM Schools? Like I said, and next slide, please. Like I said, our work is primarily through schools and through community-based organizations. We want to ensure that the support for our families, for our students, the teachers and administrators that serve them are systemic. We cannot let, the actions of schools, the actions of how a school responds be knee-jerk. We can't have these be dependent on individual ideologies. We need to have systemic responses at the district level, at the regional level for what we do. So we work with school districts to put safe zone resolutions in place. You'll see that work that we are highlighting here in Philadelphia, in New York, in San Antonio. We put on pop-up webinars for families on family preparedness, like that flyer that you see on the right. What does it mean to be prepared right now? What do you have to have in place? We're beyond just knowing what your rights are. Our families are telling us, se están violando nuestros derechos. Our rights are being violated. We need something else. So what we're doing is ensuring that families feel prepared. Just one second. I'm so sorry, y'all. I have a terrible, terrible cold. But, in the images below, you'll see how our response is both virtual and it is in person. Many of our families choose to come to us with their cameras off, with their names removed, and that is perfectly fine. We create safe places for our families. Some of our educators show up to our webinars with their cameras turned off as well, right? Depending on what state you're serving in, we are here to serve you. On the next couple of slides, you'll see some of the key federal protections that we have in place. That QR code is going to take you to an amazing resource that we worked with the Bellwether Foundation on for school leaders, for teachers. What do I need to know at my level? What can I do at the local level? Beyond what's protected federally, how can I act locally? What systems can I have in place? What should I know? So what are these key federal protections and what do they look like in action? So we have that for enrollment and student services. Next slide. FERPA. How does FERPA play into this? What do you need to know about FERPA? What do our families need to know? Next slide. And what constitutes a non-public area? Principals need to know that. The district police department needs to know it. Teachers need to know it. If the whole system knows it, well, then we're not in panic mode making mistakes when something happens, right? We have to be prepared at a systems level, and the communication tree needs to be in place. This is something that we're working on actively, and I'll show you on just a bit in this resource that I told you we worked on the Bellwether with the Bellwether Foundation, actual scenarios on what to do in the moment that you can study. Next slide, please. So there's a link and a QR code to that resource. It's important that we're all trying to protect ourselves, right? We're trying to protect the organizations that we work for. We're trying to protect our families, right? But we don't need to pre-comply with things based on certain administrative orders unless there's a federal some kind of federal guideline, right? We know that federal protections take precedence for our students, which is why it's super important that we know these things. These checklists that we have here and these scenarios are a really great resource for you to explore. Next slide, please. This is our information on how to partner with us, but I'm going to drop in the chat. I want you to actually go to the end of the Bellwether resource when I drop it in the chat to the part that walks you through actual scenarios on what to do in certain instances and in certain spaces of the school or the school district. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Esme. I really appreciate your presentation. And you said something very important that I know in Texas we call English learners emergent bilinguals, but the fact is that we have 5.3 million emergent bilinguals in the United States, and 70% of them are US citizens. And these are our children that we must invest and advocate for, because they are the future of our communities, and we need to ensure that, they are safe and that they are attending our public schools, because they are the students attending our schools are those are the places that they can be the most safe right now. And I think that that's something that we need to reiterate to our comunidades, right? We have a lot of students not attending school, but this is a good opportunity to really share these resources with the families. And I love the different ways that ImSchool is really encouraging and working with families to have this information. Well, next we have Cesar Moreno Perez. He is the Senior Associate Director and Human Rights Community Relations at the American Federation of Teachers. Shout out to AFT. AFT was one of my unions when I was a teacher, and they certainly have stepped up and put a wonderful array of information that it's hands-on, and I'm so happy that you're with us, Cesar. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Montserrat. Good afternoon or good evening, friends at NABE. And thank you again to NABE for hosting this urgent and necessary conversation. So as Montse said, I'm Cesar Moreno Perez with the 1.8 million member American Federation of Teachers, where I have the honor to lead our immigration work. You know, I often say that I need someone to wake me up from this nightmare that we are living in today. A nightmare that played itself out 8 years ago, but for some reason, it feels more intense this time around. Not sure how many of you know that this morning, immigration enforcement officers followed a teacher into the Rayito del Sol Spanish Immersion Learning Center in Illinois and detained her. Officials didn't present a warrant, and they showed complete disregard for the safety of children and others in the learning center. They dragged her out of her work. This is the climate that we're living in. As educators, regardless of where we are in the continuum of public education, or as community leaders, unionists, or just people of conscience, we cannot be silent to those shifting winds that are threatening the livelihood of students and families throughout this country, as Morgan mentioned. You know, at the AFT, we believe that every child deserves the freedom to learn, that every educator deserves the freedom to teach, and that every family deserves the freedom to live without fear. But today, too many of our children are waking up afraid. They worry that their parent or sibling may not come home when they return from school. They see these raids in their neighborhoods, federal agents patrolling their streets, armed officers at the courthouses, and this hateful rhetoric that tells them that they do not belong. And that fear, that constant anxiety follows them into the classrooms. Educators see that every day, and they see the student who suddenly stops raising their hand in class, the child who flinches when they hear the sirens outside, or in the quiet, worried look when the classmate's parent is taken away, or when a child whispers, "Will they detain my mom or my siblings today?" You know, when children carry this kind of chronic fear, learning simply cannot happen. And when families are torn apart, our democracy begins to unravel. We have witnessed federal agents break car windows, again, detain immigrants in courthouses, at school drop-offs, and even outside of workplaces. So these threats of mass deportation raids are designed to terrorize families, to create that chaos and silence dissent. Let's be clear, this is not about safety or rule of law. It's about fear, control, and cruelty. What we are seeing isn't just about immigration. It's about something larger, a deliberate effort to divide us, to distract us from the real issues, from the cost of groceries, from the lack of nurses and counselors in our schools, from the urgent need to strengthen our communities. So this abuse of power makes no one safer. It makes our communities less safe. And so the title of today's session, Prepared, Protected, and Empowered, is very fitting, because education, not deportation, is what keeps our communities strong. Schools must be those sanctuaries, those safe, welcoming places of learning and belonging that reflect the best of who we are as a nation. So ensuring that every child can learn in a safe, welcoming environment is not only a moral obligation for educators and school support staff, it is the law. Recognizing that urgency of this moment, the AFT has worked to move from the defensive to the proactive to preparation, developing practical guidance, tools, and resources that equipped our educators and school employees with the tools to support their students and communities effectively. Some of the resources that are shown here on the slide, you could visit the aft.org/immigration, which serves as our immigration hub with tons of resources. We partnered with some of our national organizations, including the National Immigration Law Center, CLASP, United with Dreaming Kids and Kids in Need of Defense, to publish the Immigrant and Refugee Children, a guide for educators and school support staff. This is a comprehensive guide that offers clear, actionable strategies to help educators and school support staff, youth, and families, including taking steps before, during, and after potential immigration enforcement actions. The guide here in my hand is what you'll see when you go into the FT website. At the heart of this guide, we have the Safe Welcoming Schools framework, a practical roadmap that helps educators protect students and respond effectively in these times of crisis in and outside the classrooms. First, it begins with that legal foundation that was just mentioned, that under the Supreme Court, a case of Tyler-Rideau, that every child, regardless of their citizenship or immigration status, has the constitutional right to a free public education, that schools cannot deny enrollment for the lack of documentation. And yes, of course, under FERPA, right, schools cannot share student information with federal agents without parental consent. These laws are not just technicalities. They are the shields that protect trust between families and educators. And then second, educators have rights and responsibilities, right? At the AFT, we've been very clear in our position. Randy, Evelyn, and Fed, who are the officers of the AFT, have made it very clear, right? That educators should not be used as de facto immigration agents, that they are protectors, children's safety and well-being, that every district should have clear and written protocols on how do we respond to immigration agents when they appear at or near a school, that only trained staff should review warrants, that no educator should ever share information about a student without legal review. And third, that we must be prepared, but we must prepare and act, that every school should have Know Your Rights material ready for families in language. From New York to Chicago, Los Angeles to Orlando, Boston, and here in San Juan, Puerto Rico, AFT members are standing shoulder to shoulder with parents and community leaders. They are helping parents create family emergency preparedness plans, sharing the Know Your Rights information, organizing citizenship clinics, supporting families through the trauma, connecting with local rapid response networks, and designating those safe spaces for students affected by immigration enforcement actions. And in instances like today in Illinois, that when a teacher is detained or where students have been picked up on their way to school, our leaders, our members have joined community to say loudly and clearly, hands off our babies, hands off our educators. Schools should be places of learning and not battlegrounds for deportation. That's what leadership looks like: proactive, principled, and protective. You can find, again, all these resources on the AFT's Immigration Hub. Again, they are in Korean and Tagalog and Chinese, Armenian, and a whole bunch of other resources. So I implore you to go onto the AFT website. Friends, we know that when we protect immigrant children, we are protecting the very promise of public education itself. The promise that every child, no matter where they or their parents come from, that they can learn, they can dream, and they can thrive. So to every educator, parent, and advocate tuning in today to NABE's webinar, thank you. Thank you for believing, as we do at the AFT, that education should lift people up, not lock them out. That classrooms should be places of hope, not fear. And that America is best when it keeps its promises to all who call it home. Together we can and we will make that promise real. Together we can serve as that beacon of hope for our students, for our teachers, for our children and our families in these challenging times. To pretend again that education and our healthcare systems act outside of the political realities is to ignore the social realities of our students, our patients, and our families that we serve. To quote Sonia Sotomayor in the Noam Vasquez Perdomo case, we should not have to live in a country where the government can seize anyone who looks Latino, speaks Spanish, and appears to work in a low-wage job, rather than stand idly by while our constitutional freedoms are lost. She says, I dissent. So I urge you, my friends, to join this call to action, to fight, as a slogan on my shirt proudly says, fight for those without your privilege. Muchísimas gracias. Thank you.
Cesar, thank you. You are, I love the passion, but I know that you also, and with the AFT, you all lead by example. And these resources have been so thoughtfully done, and they are a great resource to our comunidades. So we put a lot of the links on the chat. Thank you. Next, we have Please help me welcome the Executive Director from Reimagine Migration. His name is Adam Strom, and we are delighted to have you, Adam. Welcome.
Thank you so much. This is an amazing group of people, and I'm really honored to be part of this group. What you know, I think it's really important that we recognize both the particularity about what's happening to our immigrant youth and their families, right, in our schools. But I also think it's important to understand that what is going on is affecting everybody. There was research a few years ago at UCLA looking at how does high immigrant enforcement impact school communities. And in response to the study done by John Rogers and his colleagues, 68% of school administrators said it got in the way of everybody's ability to learn. Teachers are saying they just couldn't teach. And so why is that happening, right? So this is about ambient anxiety, right? You have folks who are in the community saying, "Hey, how safe am I here? Is this building a safe place for me? Can I walk into the school?" You've heard these stories, but it strains peer relationships. All of a sudden, kids are saying, "Wait a minute, why can't my friend come over? Why doesn't he feel safe to come over to my house? Why doesn't she feel safe to come over to my house?" It's staff getting diverted, not only getting chased, as Cesar said so eloquently, by ICE, but it's staff who's having to respond to the needs of families in emergency situations that they weren't either trained to deal with or expecting to deal with at the beginning of the school day, right? A couple of years ago, they were in this study. They said that principals were spending about an hour and a half a week working on issues related to schools and families' documentation status. This is not how they expected to be spending their time, and then trust in these institutions erode, right? Of course it would. When you have a parent meeting and then all of a sudden there's immigration enforcement out in front of the school, how do you trust this space? Is this space safe for me, right? So everyone is impacted. But on the other hand, what's going on now is actually part of a larger pattern. We've watched over the years about how the unequal education that immigrant origin youth receive. So Carola Suarez Orozco and her husband Marcelo Suarez Orozco did really fabulous work in a book called Learning in a New Land about a decade ago. They found a couple things that should make our stomachs turn. Only 6% of immigrant students could name a teacher or a youth worker that they'd go to with a problem. 6%. Only 3% could name an educator who is proud of them. And actually, it gets worse the longer young people from immigrant backgrounds are in school. So kids come to the school with great hope, great feelings of excitement, and they want to belong. There's all kinds of research. Immigrant families come into schools with really high expectations about the role that education is going to play in their family's life and their life. Yet the longer that young people are in school, the less likely they are to feel like they belong. We will get into this in a second. But I think it's important to recognize this isn't about necessarily the immediate supports that they get coming into schools with multilingual learners and English language learners. This is about what happens in the whole building. The more young people are in the schools and the more they start to succeed, the less likely they're to be interacting with people who actually have some background in working with immigrant youth. So when we're talking systemic, as Esmeralda was saying, this is systemic. This is the whole building. Right? The multilingual learner staff may actually have training and may actually have some skills in building community. But what happens when folks are in the rest of the building? So this is deeper than a language barrier. Some people say, "Oh, the kids will just speak English, it's going to be fine." No. This is about how we've designed an infrastructure that is not working for immigrant origin youth. And when it's not working for immigrant origin youth, it's not working for anybody. It's a litmus test, right? So what I would like us to think about, and you can do a lot in 5 minutes, right? No, but it can try. So I want you to think about How do you honestly assess where your organization stands in this work? Think about what thriving looks like if we were to center immigrant kids. Understand the difference, and Cesar and Esmeralda both began to talk about this. The difference between kind of a crisis response action, but really longer term systematic change, right? Because both are necessary. And then I would like everybody here who's listening to think about what are your next steps? Like next steps. We can't wait. By the end of the webinar, start thinking about what are the next 3, 4 things you're going to do over not over the next 6 months, you're going to do tomorrow. So to slip into dream mode, we need to start with a larger framework, which is how can we help schools strengthen belonging because of the demographic change, because immigrant origin kids are in the building, not despite it, right? Schools are places that remake themselves in their communities every year. Migration is just one Immigrant youth and migration is just one piece of this. But school communities have to remake themselves all the time. So what if we pay attention to how communities remake themselves? We'll make schools better for immigrant kids, but actually we're going to be building stronger school communities for everybody. So here are 7 pieces of the puzzle if you're thinking about building belonging. This is from a lot of research, none of it mine, but I can synthesize it. So I think it starts with trusting relationships and how to actually educators understand who's in their classroom and not just think about them from an academic perspective, but also understand their backgrounds or strengths, right? We cannot continue to work at this through a deficit base. We also need to know what families feel vulnerable. 2, and you can't start without this. You have to start by making sure people feel safe, right? And included. Safe first, but included. It's part of the same line. And what we know, and I'll get into this, is that actually non-immigrant students report being much less likely to intervene when immigrant kids are getting bullied than anybody else. That means they're open about it. 3, you hear this from immigrant kids all the time. They don't feel like they're included academically. They feel like they're pushed off to the side. Right? So how are we making sure, they talk about this all the time, the warm demander. How do we make sure that we're actually challenging young people? Because part of belonging is feeling like the teachers around you think that you're smart. Most immigrant kids, this is research, again, not mine, will tell you that they don't think that their teachers think that they're very smart. They may like them, but their teachers tend not to think that they're very smart. In this crisis, this is, think about what is that relationship with a teacher and what does your teacher think about them? This is really important, particularly now. How do you make sure that you're offering support without further stigmatizing people and making people stand out? Right? This is going to be really important as SNAP benefits feel like they're very fragile in this moment. How do you find places where kids aren't singled out so much, but are receiving the support that they need, or trauma support if a family member is feeling particularly vulnerable or is vulnerable? We argue that part of the way to do this is actually making migration a lens for understanding, because migration is actually just what human beings do. That humans move, they move forever, right? I mean, you look at our DNA. Human beings' migration stories are traceable in our DNA. So the more we can normalize these stories, the more we start to shift the narrative. And then the last piece is we really, really have to flip the script on as we think about family engagement and how do we create multiple pathways for parents to belong to a school community, right? And recognize family expertise. This is high level. Anything I mention here, you find on our website. But I want to start here. We really believe at Reimagining Migration that immigrant origin youth are the litmus test for belonging in any school community. And why some of it is about young people's identities. We know immigrant youth are a very, very diverse population, but what's interesting is as diverse as they are, they're also only visible in school data by whether they're an English learner or a multilingual learner or not, right? So these are kids who are going through real challenges sometimes, not by their own making, right? And yet we don't see them. So we know that about 80% of school administrators report speaking out about to promote tolerance, in general. We know that about 85% of folks say that they do so around issues of race. but only 49% of school administrators in that same study from John Rogers report speaking out specifically about anti-immigrant attitudes and specifically to support immigrant youth. That gap suggests an institutional problem. Leadership has to speak out against anti-immigrant prejudice. Otherwise, you norm it, right? And so the consequences are a problem. It's much worse in schools that are majority white. When it's in schools that are predominantly kids of color, there's a lot more administrators that speak out, but still on the national average, it's less than 50%. So reimagining approaches all this work with 5 questions that we think we all need to be thinking about as educators all of the time. And this is through a project that we developed with Project Zero at Harvard Graduate School of Education. They actually did the research, and but it's the basis of our work. But 5 questions. Think about who are the young people we're educating, and how does migration impact their lives? What are the most important perspectives and skills that all young people need to develop for participating and living in a world of migration, a world on the move? How do we teach about migration in a way that it actually builds understanding, perspective taking, and tolerance? Right? Because right now, teachers are ducking these issues or treating it as a current event, and it becomes only a crisis. How do we create powerful learning environments where everybody knows that they belong, right? These 7 steps I suggested to you a minute ago are ways to start to get there. But then I think we need to think systemically about how do we make sure that all educators understand that they are teaching in schools that are currently about 27% immigrant origin youth. That is first generation and second generation. And so that's over a quarter of the kids. So how do you think about we're making sure that they understand that part of their responsibility is not to ignore those folks? So I want to end with a story because I think it's helpful to have a little bit of a positive note somewhere. So this is a teacher. Her name is Sandy. I'm not going to say her last name. She teaches in a state that is not necessarily incredibly immigrant friendly, but she teaches in a very diverse school. And she went to a professional development session I led years ago, and I was saying to her how important it is to make the diversity of a school community visible. And she had a bunch of English learners, multilingual learners, who were, by culture of the school, not by law, kept out of the other clubs in schools. So nobody wanted them on the sports team, nobody wanted them in the other clubs, and they all just sat at these cafeteria tables. And she tried to do something. She's like, we're going to create an international cafe, and we're going to be here together. But these kids knew that they were being isolated. And the kids are saying, hey, we have families from all over the world in our school. Why is this happening? So what they did with her support is they researched all the different languages being spoken at the school and all the different countries that everybody was coming from in the school. And they decided to become the official greeters of the school. They flipped the script from being the kids on the outside to being the kids who would welcome. And once a month, they would stand in front of the school with pom-poms and signs in every language that was spoken at the school. And these young people became the greeters. What happened year 2 is even more fascinating. So 1 year, and these kids are, passing this stuff out. The second year, the non-EL kids, the non-multilingual learner kids are like, hey, can we be part of that? They wanted to make this an alliance program because they realized that these kids who had been on the outside were now leaders. And so when you give young people the opportunity to lead, give them the opportunity to bring them full selves to school, it makes the whole building a better place. So I want to leave you with a little bit of hope today. I think it's hard, for all of us, but this is what can happen. It's not so hard. It's
Thank
not
you
so
so much,
hard.
Adam. Yes, thank you for that story. That was beautiful. And now I know we're running out of time, but now we have our local stories because we know that it's important the information that you get, but we really want to give you uh, the testimonies of the people that are on the ground. And it is my great pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Victor Vergara from Mount Vernon School District in Washington. And let's welcome him.
Thank you. Thank you, Montserrat. Thank you, Navi, for the opportunity. And I know we're running out of time. So in a few minutes, I want to talk a little bit from the superintendent point of view. I'm the proud superintendent of Mount Vernon School District. We're about an hour north of Seattle. We have about 7,000 students, 58% of Latina students, about 30% of them multilingual learners, almost 70% of our students low income, 20% of migrant students. And I want to start with this slide. I have only two slides, but one is this one, where I say, si nosotros no quién, if no us, who, si no es ahora, cuándo, if no who, when. And this is, and I say lead boldly, lead with a purpose. One thing that I have learned from my mentors is about really being bold in the seat that I am right now as a superintendent and really walk the talk, because I have seen a lot of leaders, a lot of superintendents that do talk, but they don't do the walk and they don't do the actual work. And I think this is really important in our seats, that we do the talk and we really have things in place, especially when we're talking about our students. Here, as you see in this picture, all these faces, right? So you see one of our mariachi musicians here, and you see one of our singers here singing for one of the Mariners game just about few weeks ago. This is who we are here in Mount Vernon, right? So this is our tradition, our cultures, right, that we see every day in our campuses, in our schools, and we're protecting all our kids, the 7,000 of them every day. And with that, about a year ago, exactly about a year ago, we had some activity here in our town. ICE was around, and it's my first year as a superintendent. I was kind of waiting to see, okay, who other superintendents around, who is doing something to protect their students. And as I was waiting, nobody was doing anything, to the point that I was like, okay, I guess I need to be the first one. So if we go to the next slide, please. So the first thing we did, with the support of our board, we passed a proclamation, and as you see the date, December 18 of 2024, and we have different items here. One of them was a commitment to a safe learning environment for our students, right? And obviously their families, protection of student privacy, staff training and support in partnership with community organizations, and commitment to equity and advocacy for our district. So that was the step one, right, for us to say, here we are, we're protecting our students, all our students and their families. And after that, we passed two policies early February of this year, one around interview and interrogation of students on the school premises, and the other one limiting immigration enforcement in the schools. So that was the first step for us to say, yes, we are building a plan, but that was the first step to start, the first step for us to create a plan. So we have our vision is all around, we inspire, we dream, and we achieve. And for us to, this goal is to make that belief is real, especially during moments of crisis. So this plan centers immigrant and multilingual students, ensuring they always feel safe, supported, and seen. So as we all know, and we have discussed this, our students deal every day with fears of separation, mistrust of systems, language barriers, and emergencies. So this crisis response plan ensures no student's safety or sense of belonging is left to chance. So basically what we do, number one, relationships. We have wonderful staff in our organization. We have 1,000 employees that the relationships is number one. It's part of our strategic plan, and all the way from our janitors to our teachers to our principals to our I mean, you name it. Everybody knows everyone, and they do care for our kids and their families. So that is key when we talk about our families and our kids. And we have clear communication, emotional and physical safety for our kids. And like I say, also, right, calling to action. And the key steps, again, like I share. So we draft a board resolution. We align those district policies. We adopt clear protocols, guiding staff response to immigration enforcement. We have in our schools specific guidelines. If we see ICE activity across our schools, our principals, they have specific protocols that they must follow. One of them, they need to call the superintendent. They're not allowed to respond. They need to call me or my assistant superintendent before any communication with them. Also, we have a specific trauma-informed crisis response around safety, trust, and empowerment. We have everything that is around family engagement that supports and help our students and families, especially situations after crisis. And we have a specific connection with community. So that we always say somos Mount Vernon. We are Mount Vernon. So we have partnership with community organizations. We are partnering with city, with police. So again, this is something that we are the first ones to do. I have a speed dial with the city mayor, with the police chief. Why? Because we cannot do this by ourselves. So if they see or they hear something, they're gonna call me or vice versa. So again, I'm proud to be here in this community, to be part of this community, and I believe we're doing a good job protecting our students and families. We're gonna continue. This is not over, but my message to all of us is let's keep doing this. Somebody said we cannot stop fighting, but we also need to be bold and brave on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vergara. This is all about building relationships and being bold. And the fact that you, as a superintendent, have joined us today to share, we need more superintendents to be that bold and to lead by example. So thank you for your presentation. Okay, next we have Alondra Garcia. She's the president of the Wisconsin Association for Bilingual Education. Alondra, it's all yours now.
Okay, can y'all hear me? Good, awesome. Great. So I made this slideshow with a couple of pictures, so I'll just be kind of talking. So these are a couple of educators who did a rally before school started, supporting our immigrant community, and I'm right there smack in the middle. So an example, let's see, sorry, there we go. So the agenda is mobilizing bilingual educators and local partners, collaborating with immigration resources and legal aid, and building trust through multilingual family-centered communication. So I failed to introduce myself, but I'm a second grade bilingual teacher in the Milwaukee Public Schools District, president of WIABE, and also president of Voces de la Frontera. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. So a situation that had happened was that I was suspended for sharing Know Your Rights information with my families right after the president election results came through, right? Because I wanted to be proactive, be there for my families. I know what it feels like to be in their shoes. I'm an undocumented educator myself. I'm working through the U visa process. So I know exactly what these babies are feeling, right? So as you can see, I wasn't going to tolerate it. That day of my scheduled suspension, I did a protest. I did a protest in front of my school, talking about the injustice that's being done to me as an educator and our families, because our district does say that we have a safe haven resolution that was passed in 2017 under the first Trump administration. And for them to say that they are for our immigrant community and allowing the principal at my school to essentially say that what I did in communicating with my families was deemed political is complete nonsense, because we know the realities of what's happening right now. And I just wanted to be proactive for my family. So I did that, right? And I received a lot of community support. And I was very grateful for being able to speak out about this and let other people know that, and educators know, right? And our community knows that we can't stay silent. We have to do something about what's happening. So this is another picture, and these were the people who were present at the protest that day of my scheduled suspension. And then, as you can see on the right, there was a meeting afterwards to communicate with the parents about what are the next steps to do, right? And talking with the superintendent of the district, because it was just wishy-washy. Like some some principals were doing it, were communicating what the protocol was if I showed up at schools, and others weren't. And the principal in my school was not. So then, kind of fast forwarding, there was this meeting with the interim superintendent, and we had a conversation. We still have to do some follow up, but at least we're doing the communication and we're making sure and we're assuring ourselves and assuring our families that there is protocol in place, that there are Know Your Rights resources on our website, and that our families, our immigrant students and families, are protected, right? And that ICE is not allowed to be on our schools, at our schools, and that they're supposed to be directed to central office to talk to a certain individual who's in charge of that. And then the picture on the right is of Voces de la Frontera, who is a pro-immigrant rights organization, which I also hold the president role there. The day of my birthday, I had a visit from my principal's boss who told me essentially that they were allowed to come to our school for family resource when the principal of my school didn't want them there because of what had happened a couple of months ago. So it was reassuring to know that the district was, supporting our families and not following in the steps of the principal in my school. So then we collaborate with Voces very closely. They were at our annual conference. We had Christine Newman Ortiz, who is the executive director for the organization, come and speak up to our educators about what's happening in Wisconsin specifically in regards to the history of immigration and the work that we've been doing. And then obviously, as you all know, May Day comes up. So we really do encourage our students to participate, right? And join in solidarity. And the district does a really good job of supporting it. So I'm very grateful that they allow our students to join us. And there's a couple of pictures here of the crowd of people that are involved. These are elected officials with myself, executive director, and so on. And that's the picture of how that protest looked like. It was pretty well attended, as you can see. So then our website contains immigration resources, and this was a documented that was created by us as WIABE board members. And as you can see, sorry, that's a timer. These are just a bunch of resources that we put together under this document, and they were released to our members and to our community about mid-January. So this is some of the work that Voces does. They do Amiga Watch training, and I've been part of facilitating and also sharing those resources of what kind of training that they do. They do the piqueteros training for if need be. In front of the USCIS office, we were more likely to do this kind of action, right? And then what court accompaniment looks like, right? And they've been doing really solid job of getting people involved with these trainings and being part of the movement. This is another page where it shows that we do tell our educators and families and community members that if they need legal resources and legal aid to go towards Voces de la Frontera website. And here is what the money would be used for and who can apply, as you can see. And then how to apply. So essentially it's a document and you fill out your information and we get back to you with information on how to move forward with your situation, your case. And this is a picture of us, the board members of WIABE at Voces de la Fronteras Gala, annual gala, in support of funding, because it was essentially a fundraiser for the legal defense aid fund. And this is our statement that was released in January, right after, Trump was in office again. Just another picture of the resources that we have. And well, just to end, is one fight, all workers unite, unidos en la lucha, obreros en acción. We have to stay together, move forward. If you want to, contact me about exactly how does these trainings look like and how they were developed, please. I know Montserrat can send that information over with my email and we can get in contact. Thank you.
Alondra, thank you so much for sharing your personal story and your bravery and courage. We need, you are a great example of what educators can do And of course, everybody needs to join their union to ensure that you have your rights. But this is what it's all about, right? You can be as loud as you want, or you can work behind the scenes to ensure that that our students are being protected. So with that, I'm gonna pass it to our president, Margarita Machado, to finalize the webinar. Adelante.
Thank you so much to our incredible speakers. Today has been just amazing. And to each one of you who joined us today. What we heard today remind us of that preparedness isn't just a plan. It's really an act of love. Every single example that we heard today and every single speaker that we heard today, really in the organization is doing what they're doing because of an act of love, an act of resistance. When we protect and uplift our immigrant students, we strengthen our schools, our communities, and every promise that we have to them in this nation. We have both a responsibility and an opportunity to lead with courage and with compassion, to be bold and brave, like Dr. Vergara said. We cannot and will not allow mass deportations, raids, and fear define our communities. Our schools must remain sanctuaries of hope, places where every student, regardless of their status, knows that they're safe, welcome, and loved. This is our moment. This is our call to action. So to every district, every school, every educator, you heard some amazing examples today. Turn today's inspiration into action. Before the semester end, build or strengthen your crisis response plan, not as paperwork, but as a promise, as action. Teachers are the heartbeat of this work. We just heard Alondra, muchas gracias. When educators and families stand together, we create an unbreakable circle of protection around our students. And remember, you're not alone. At NABE, we stand with you. Reach out to us, to every single partner organization that you heard today that you feel can help you in moving this forward. We are here for you. We are here with you every step of the way. Let's continue the momentum. Join us, please, in our next webinar. We're going to have a webinar on higher education on December 3rd. But just to end, muchas gracias. Adelante. Together we rise, together we lead, and together we build safe and inclusive schools for every single one of you and of us. Muchas gracias, Montserrat. Gracias a todos. Buenas noches, buenas tardes.
Ciao.